go live now. So people who are not here can watch it on the replay. All right, so we're live. So welcome, Mr. White. I'm as program director and the expert in computer science. Having done many major project supervision, I think you're the best person in the school, in my opinion, to give students a good idea of what we're expecting for the prototype demonstration. In fancy language, you call it the artifact. So since 25% of the mark for the final Viva, if you do research and then development, is for the prototype, you have to pay close attention to what you should be presenting. So I'm going to welcome Mr. White to give a summary of what needs to be done. Welcome, Mr. White, Head of Intelligence, what is it? Systems Lab? I'm saying the wrong thing, right? Please give us the name of your lab.
It's the Intelligent Systems Research Lab.
Okay, thank you.
You
can go ahead.
All righty. Just confirm for me that you're hearing me okay?
Yeah, I wasn't hearing you before, but now we're hearing you fine.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Right, I just put on my headset, and I'm not going to be presenting slides. I'm just going to speak to it at this point. All right, so welcome again, students. And we have a reputation of over the years of having extremely fantastic major projects. And of course, though there isn't a requirement to produce, there's not a strict requirement. You must absolutely produce a software artifact. Both lecturers and staff tend to, they want to show their prowess. And so it has been the norm for us to have some real tangible artifacts in the fact of, a software prototype or even a combination of software and hardware prototypes. And I'm supervising 2 projects this semester, and I know that they are producing their prototypes. All right. So what exactly is the purpose of the prototype or the artifact? Well, formally, a prototype really is geared towards seeing if something can work and how it will work. So before I come back to our major project, if you allow me to just speak very generically, if, for instance, a car company has an idea, what is next year? They always have to be selling cars, and from time to time, they change the look and the feel so that they can sell even more cars next year and the year after. So the designer might come up with a design for next year's car, right? And he presents that to the committee. And if they are in agreement, of course, the design might go through several phases, of refinement until it is approved. If it is approved, then they go ahead. Before they start making the cars en masse, right? What they would do is they would build a prototype of the car. They might even build several prototypes, and then that will go through testing to see if it is really what the company wants to identify itself with. You follow? So they would build a prototype, probably one first, and they would test it. Does it have the driving ability that the company wants to be associated with? What about safety, right? Does it work the way the previous models work or better, right? And so on and so on and so on. Sometimes you see a prototype is not necessary. Like with a car, you probably have several modules already. So the prototype is an improvement on what was there before. But you also might have a prototype of something that has never ever been built, right? So you probably could come up with an electric car, or you probably could come up with something completely innovative, right? Like, for instance, the first light bulb that came out. And Thomas Edison, if you recall, built several prototypes before he got, I think some books say over 100, before he got the final one working. He tried it. What happens if I connect a battery and apply electricity to a piece of wood? Will that create a light bulb? Nah, didn't work. And so he tries again. What happens if I put a piece of cloth, right? Probably wet the cloth and I apply 2 electrodes to it, a negative and a positive. Try it. Does it work? No. And so he tried again, right? So that's a prototype. The prototype is there to test if what you want or if what you envisage actually works or can work. You also produce a prototype as a proof of concept. So you know, or you have an idea, or you set out to see if a thing can works a particular way. And when you build a prototype, it is enough to demonstrate that the thing will work or will not work. All right. So sufficient care has to go into your prototype that it is representative, is a true representation of what you of what the fuller research wants to convey. All right. And I will take some questions right after. So your prototype, you see, as I said, has to be representative. So if it is that you are designing a spaceship, then a car or a handcart would not be a sufficient prototype for what you're building, because the spaceship might come under different forces, you know, of gravity and so on, that a car would not, right? So you couldn't build a car and say, this is a prototype of our spaceship project. You follow? Because it would not be sufficiently representative, all right? And the thing about, why do you want to build a prototype instead of building the actual artifact or the full artifact? Well, for one, cost, right, and time. And remember also, when you engage in research, there's nothing that says that the research is going to give you the result that you had expected. I've seen research, and even our own major project research, where students set out to see if a particular thing worked. And when they do it, it turns out that it didn't work out the way, and they still get a perfect A as the score. So remember, research is an investigation, all right? So a prototype can save you the trouble of building a very expensive artifact only to realize that it didn't work the way you want, or it didn't get the results you want. The cost of building the prototype is usually much cheaper than the cost of building the full artifact. And the same thing goes with software, right? You create a prototype of the software instead of writing the full-blown thing. And if it seems like it will work, then the powers that be might make the decision, right, to say, okay, go ahead and build out now the full thing, because we tested the prototype and the prototype has promise, all right? If it didn't work, then you can tear up that prototype, right? You can destroy that prototype or refine it, go back to the drawing board and then come again, right? Or you can discard it altogether and say, well, we tried the prototype and based on the results we got, we are not convinced we should continue with this project. We are going to abandon it and move on to something else. Follow? All right, so that is the overview of a prototype. Now, within the short time I have, let me just jump straight to major project prototype. So you want to design an artifact, if it is that you so mentioned that in your methodology, that is representative of what you are trying to achieve. And that, remember, you started out in chapter 1 by saying you have a problem. So you gave a problem statement, and then you explain why that problem is significant, right? And relevant. And then you put up some research questions. And in answering those research questions, then the answer to those research questions would give an answer to the research problem that you are investigating. So where does the prototype fit in all of this? In chapter 2, you set out to lay out the literature. What does the literature have to say about the particular topic you are researching or subtopics? Have other persons done research like this or similar? If so, what was the result? And why? Why did it go this route? If not, why it is that nobody has done this research before, right? Or is there any suggestion, any innovation in that space? So in other words, you do a review of the literature, right? So that will guide you as you now go into your chapter 3 in chapter 3, you set out the methodology for your particular slant of the research. If it's a brand new research, it's innovative, nobody has done it before, then you state what it is that you are trying to do. If it is that the research was somebody has done something like this before, then in your methodology, you state how your research is going to be different from what others have done, right? So what is your new take on it? Now, the prototype, where it comes in, after you lay out in your methodology, whether you're doing an experiment, you're doing a survey, or all the other different types of research, the prototype now is supposed to help you in answering the research questions. So the prototype has to be designed to try and answer one or more of the questions that you set out. So you can't say, we want to find out if every time the sky is gray, it will rain, or is there a greater than 50% chance that if the sky is dark gray, it will rain. And we are going to build a prototype to test that. And the prototype I build is a pot to go on a stove. And I'm deliberately being ridiculous because I sit on the panels sometimes, to help review the projects. And you see students put up a prototype, a nice fancy website or a nice piece of software, or they come in with a piece of hardware and lights flashing all over the place. And, you want to applaud. And then at the end of the day, when it comes to them showing the results, you're asking, how does the prototype relate back to the questions that you ask in chapter 1? So if I say nothing else, what I want you to get from here is that your prototype must help you in answering your research questions. Sometimes you see, you have some, you're skit students, we have some real bright students, you have some real good programming students, you have some real good innovators, you have some designers, and they come and they spend a lot of time. You can see the energy and the pride, as they demonstrate the piece of software or the combination of hardware and software prototype. And then they use an inordinate amount of time to demonstrate that prototype. And when now you come back to Earth, right? You say, as a panel, as a member of the panel, you're wondering, but how does the prototype that they just demonstrated relate to the rest of the project? You follow? So remember that the prototype must help in answering the questions. Now, there are some things you see as you test the prototype that you might want to consider. For instance, what's the precision in the prototype and the recall? And in order to calculate those, there's a formula which I will give you in a second, but I will give you some definitions. So you have, for instance, something called a true positive. You also have something called a false positive, and you have another entity called a false negative. Now, a true positive, right, is when you run the prototype, right, it is supposed to recognize something or do something or work a particular way. If when you run the test on it, and remember, Susan Muir and the rest of the CRM team would have taught you SMART. SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. SMART, S-M-A-R-T. So you must, when you're presenting the results, it must be based on the SMART. There must be SMART results. They must be based on empirical evidence. Now, a true positive is a measure, right, of when you run the prototype, right, it is supposed to act a particular way. A true positive means that it does what it's supposed to do, right? So you can measure the number of true positives. A false positive is when it tells you that it does something. So again, going back to my rain example, right? If you're building a rain detector and probably are building something to check if it actually rained. And of course, you'd have something to measure the chromatic intensity of the sky. Remember, we started out by saying if when it's dark gray, there's a more than 50% chance it will rain. Now, you need to measure, you need to have something to measure the color of the sky and something to also measure if it rains, yes or no. So a true positive would be if it actually rains, if the sky is gray and it rains, then your contraption, your artifact must record that, yes, it was true. A false positive would be that it gives you a true when in fact it should give you a false. It should give you a, you follow? So it would say that it is raining when in fact it is not raining. And then a false negative is when no, is the opposite. When it is actually not rain, it is saying, right, that it is raining, or it is saying that it's not raining when it actually is raining. All right, so let me just repeat. The true positive is when it is raining and your artifact or your prototype says, yes, it is raining. The false positive is when it says it is raining when in fact it is not raining. And then the false negative is when it really is raining right now, but your machine or your software or your prototype, your artifact is saying it is not. All right. Now, based on that definition, you might want to write this down, and I'm sorry I don't have a presentation, but I just promised to give the talk today. All right. So precision and recall are two measures based on the true positives and the true negatives. Now, the precision of your artifact is the number of true positives, you might want to write this down, right? Divided by the sum of the true positives and the false positives. So it's the total number of tests. So let's say you run the experiment 10 times, right? And 7 out of the 10 times, you got true positives, right? The other 3 times, you got false positive. Precision would be 7 divided by the 7 plus 3, 10. So it would be 7 over 10. You follow? Or 0.7. So the precision of your prototype would be 0.7. The other one you want now is recall. And recall is the number of true positives over the, yes, right, I'm still here, right, over the number of false negatives. All right. Now, again, how does that factor into your research questions, right? So let us say you had 3 research questions. What part of those 3 research questions, or which of those 3 questions is the prototype answering? Probably have a piece of software, right? But probably your survey instrument is going to answer one of the questions as well. And it is, when you demonstrate your prototype, you see, remember, try to tell the audience, try to tell the panelists, try to tell the reader, which, try to couch it in such a way, remember, you know, you're communicating, right? What exactly, which part of the research is this answering? And you can't just run the software and say, oh yeah, that, see, it worked. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we just showed our software, and that concludes our prototype presentation. It is clear from our software that every time the sky is gray, there's a 50% chance it will rain. No, right? We're in the software. Where's the measurement, right? So you'd have to know, based on your literature review and your methodology and your own design, you'd have to show how you came up with that conclusion. Are you following? All right. So you have all different type of major projects. I've seen from Susan Muir the topics, and I've seen some of the write-ups. I've even had the privilege of seeing some of the demonstrations so far. Even in the Intelligent Systems Research Lab, some persons have come to us to help. Of course, the lab is not just for major projects. So we have, it's for overall intelligent research. And so we have people doing masters and PhD in there, and, you know, share ideas. But some persons have taken the opportunity to come to the lab and to showcase their projects. And of course, they have gotten feedback, right, and good critique from the lab. And we have said to them, you know, what it is that you're building as your prototype and what it is you're trying to do. And I've seen some prototypes that are trying to move the world. And we said to them, no, cut down that prototype, right? You're trying to achieve too much compared to what you said or what you stated in the chapter 1. There are also some prototypes which really don't do justice to the research at all. So somebody might just put up a simple website, and it's so simplistic that it's not really contributing much to the research. You follow? So your prototype must be representative of what it is you're trying to achieve. And when you demonstrate the prototype, right, you don't have a lot of time, right? And remember, time is also running during the setup, right? You have an initial time at first to do a quick setup, but there has to be a changeover. So usually, the groups in major projects are 3 to 5 persons normally, and you decide how you're going to do the flow. So somebody might do chapter 1, somebody else in the group does chapter 2, and then now you have the methodology. Now the person who is doing the prototype demonstration has to be quick on the draw and be ready. You can't have a long changeover. Oh, we're waiting on the software to load. Oh, we're waiting on the server. You have to fire that up and have it ready so that as the person who is before you, right, in your group says, and now we will have the prototype demonstration, then it's fired up, right? In the pandemic, you see, some persons have chosen to do a video of the prototype, right? And that is good. And I see Gresha Palmer just picked up what I'm saying, right? I particularly don't like the video recording, but I know it is allowed. I don't like it because it doesn't allow you, for instance, to see the prototype in real live action. For instance, how do you know? When I'm on the panel, I might say to the student, okay, we saw that it worked when you put in A and B, but what happens if you put in -1, right? Does it crash or does it stand up to scrutiny, right? When you have a video recording, you don't get that kind of thing. And so the panelists might not be convinced that your prototype work as well as you say it is. But of course, in the pandemic, and with all the logistics and so on, I've seen some really good video recordings of the prototype where the students might not even be in the same geographic location. Some of the students might be all across the island, and some might even be abroad. But they patch together the recording of the prototype at work, and everybody gets a chance to say what part they work on, and they show the thing, right? If you can do that, of course, again, with your supervisor's approval, then you should be good to go. But I would encourage those who can to show the prototype live and do the testing. Make sure, right? Don't say, oh, but it worked last night. I don't understand why it's not working now, right? Because remember, this is really, all of this is practice. Major project is called this capstone project. It really is practice for what you're going to do out there in the working world, right? And so it's a crowning touch, right? Everything that you have learned from academic writing 1 and research methods and college math 1B and all the programming modules, you put it and all the survey techniques and the statistics courses that you have done, you're putting them together, right? Into this capstone project to showcase that you are ready to graduate. Because make no mistake, no one can graduate from this degree unless you pass major project, all right? So you want to put pride and joy in this to say, hey, a group of us, probably 3 of us or 4 of us or 5 of us have sat together over the last year or the greater part of the year, and we have worked together, we have knocked heads together, right? Well, we're in the pandemic, so we have to social distance. So we knock our Zoom identities together, right? And we have come up with this prototype to demonstrate, to answer the questions in our research. And here it is. We have done the checks and the balances. We know it works. We are demonstrating it to you. And this is the part of the question that it answers. All right. And here are the figures. I mentioned precision and recall, but for your particular project, you might have some other metrics, right? One of my colleagues just did a research, and he was looking at biometrics, and we look at things like, if any of you come up to Skit recently in person, look at the door, you notice we don't buzz in persons anymore. You have to be authenticated with your face, right? And you have to have on a mask and all of that. Some of the things that we looked at in the prototype was what angle does it work at? What happens if I turn my face sideways? Will it still work? What distance does it work at, right? What if I go and put my face right up in there? What if I stay way out at the other end of the door, right? What about luminosity, the lighting and so on? You follow? So these are just some of the measures that he put in there. Your project might have other measures, all right? So your literature, again, should highlight some of these, and then that will help you to validate your prototype to say it works or it doesn't work. So it's not a gut feeling to say, oh, we are these awesome programmers. Here's our thing, and have a whole of colors flashing. No, right? The prototype must help in you answering the research questions, and it must give you smart measurements, right, or smart results that you can then clearly say and empirically say, right, we have, based on the results from our prototype that we just showed you, and in the discussion earlier, there was some talk about graphs versus tables versus figures versus even an appendix, right? You can say, based on the results we have just shown, right? So the person who's doing chapter 4 now, right, will present after the prototype demonstration, you then go into the results. To say, these are the results. And you can present some graphs, can present some figures, or you can present a table, or you can present a combination, but it mustn't be overwhelming, right? Again, I say you can refer to, if you have a lot of data, you can refer to it in the appendices, and you just highlight the relevant ones, right? And the graph must jump out at you. So if you are saying 90% of the time when we tested our contraption, it showed that if the sky was gray, then there was it rained, then that must come out in the data. So you might want to show the graph there that, with some trend line or so on, all right? Susan Muir did supervised a group last year in health informatics that actually got best project, the best presentation at Ministry of Health. They did an awesome job of presenting the results. I don't know if she has it and can show you. All right. So in summary,
that student actually presented to the students a week ago.
Oh,
Janelle
excellent.
did a presentation of about
Yes.
half an hour.
Yes.
And she also put the link in the chat at the time.
Yeah, it was a real good commendations are in order for that group and their supervisor. All right. So that's
some good question. So Ms. Palm is asking, how is the prototype graded? Does it need to be fully functional? Could answer that question first.
Okay. All right. So good question, Ms. Palmer. Remember, I said at the beginning, I said that a prototype is not the full artifact, right? So again, I started out using the car example. The prototype saves you on cost and so on. So it's not going to be fully functional, right? You choose the parts. The parts that you're going to put in the prototype are the parts that convey, right, the results that are relevant to showing that, they are sufficient to answer the research questions, all right? So probably if I'm building a car, I'm building a self-driving car, one of the projects that we're working on in the Intelligent Systems Lab, by the way, right? We probably wouldn't put in, all the leather seats in there and all the mirrors and so on. What we want is to just demonstrate that it can drive by itself. It's a self-driving car, right? So the persons who are working on that part, Mr. Christopher Panther is working on the software part of that with his team, right? All they need to do is to show that, look, when we put that car on UTEX road, right, on the driveway in UTEC, nobody is in there, or the person who is in there is not controlling the vehicle, and the vehicle is able to navigate its way around the thing. That's all we need to build as a prototype. You follow? The fully functional artifact would have been a complete car with all the things, all the niceties, the sunroof and all the other things, right? The car doesn't even need to have Gracia, it's Garisha Palmer. The car doesn't even need to have doors on it, Our prototype doesn't, because what we're demonstrating is just that it can drive by itself, right? So it would need to have doors on there with locks. All we need is to have the body of the car, the wheels on there, right? The engine in there, and for it to be able to drive itself, right? So you pick the parts of the prototype. You pick the parts of the artifact to put in your prototype that are sufficient enough to demonstrate what it is that you are, the research questions that you are trying to answer. And that's the purpose of a prototype. Very good question.
I have a question. Does it matter when you present the prototype in the project, you know, we have 30 minutes for presentation. What is the best time, or does it depend? How does the group decide?
Yes, I don't recall seeing an order, a presentation order. So over the years I've been here, and I've been here about a decade and a half, basically. I've seen before the pandemic, I've seen different orders. I've seen, for instance, students, you know, carry a settee into the room, and they have like a question and answer. They simulate a question and answer period, or go through the presentation. You have the standard format where everybody stands and they take turns and go through the different parts. Most of the times though, I noticed that the prototype is usually demonstrated within the methodology section or right after the methodology. I've seen though, some persons, I guess the second most popular format is everybody run through the entire project first, right? From chapter 1 to 5. And then now they use the remaining minutes. They set aside sufficient time to say, all right, and now we will demonstrate the prototype. So they do it at the end. So the two popular ones are to do the prototype demonstration in the methodology or at the end of the methodology. And the other one is to do it after you have presented all the...
And what would be the minimum time that you'd recommend, given that it's 25% of the overall grade?
Just what is sufficient. So remember, I actually addressed this at the beginning to say some persons they get carried away. They are on cloud 9, and especially the persons that have groups that have good programmers in there and good designers, and they spend an inordinate number of time showing the prototype and less time showing you the results, and even more importantly, the conclusion. So you really...
But Mr. Campbell, sorry, Mr. White, is it going to ever be less than 5 minutes or ever be more than 10 minutes?
Shouldn't be less than 5 minutes. It can, that band could be between that band. Yeah.
Any other questions, students?
Yeah, but I just want to emphasize to say that don't get carried away in presenting the prototype. So the person in the group, you know, who is doing the prototype spend all the time showing you all the bells and the whistles and things that
but
are
it
not
can also be underwhelming. There have been
and,
so many groups that they
also
don't present almost anything.
Exactly. And also you don't want an underwhelming presentation of the prototype where the person comes up and says, see here, we did a website, or we did this, and you see 2 light blink, and we have done. You can't see, you can't make the connection between that prototype that they just demonstrate and the research questions, and even worse, the conclusion. All right, so 5 to 10 minutes is a good, you know, range. Probably a 7 minutes or so might be good. All right, just demonstrate to see, guys, you know what is nice? I was a student here at UTech, just like you, right? And I can tell you, we did our presentation. We had the audience as well. We were very proud of what we had done, because we did a project that spoke the timetable, right? It generated the timetable, and you wanted to know when you have AI or when you have operating system, it would say, you have operating system module in lecture theta LT10B at 3 p.m. with Mrs. Kalila Burrell. Have a nice day, right? It was really good. And we had a big screen that we brought up and so on, right? And it used a lot of AI, used artificial intelligence in there and so on. But we didn't waste time on just the prototype itself. We know we had a prototype, and we did every check the night before, well, weeks before, up to the night before. We didn't sleep to make sure that it worked. But we spent sufficient time going through the rest of the project, laying down the theoretical foundations, showing why the research questions were relevant, right? And then we showed the results. So we ran the test more than 1 million times. And of course, going back again to the graph, you really can't put all those million runs in a table. It just wouldn't fit. And it would, you know, be too much. So we put the data in the appendix, and then in the results chapter now, we picked out a few graphs that showed that our timetable worked, right? And then in chapter 5, we presented the conclusion and recommendations.
Any other questions, students?
All right.
Question.
Well, I have somebody was asking if they could discuss something with me after the meet, but I actually have the intelligent meeting, systems meeting after this. But you could talk to your supervisor, and you can always reach out to me by email. I have 1,001 emails because you know I wear the other hat, right? I wear hat as a program director as well, and I have a lot of back emails to answer. We just finished the grading and so on. But yeah, you can reach out to me. But you should really reach out to your supervisor first, right? And if there's any way I can help, I would be more than happy to do so. All right. But I won't be available right after this meeting because I have another meeting. I have 2 other meetings after this. All right. Yeah, there was I think I heard a question coming. Yeah, go ahead and ask it, please.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. So my question is, what if you do have your prototype, it works fine, but it's not as exciting as what the other groups may have carried, but at the same time, it gets the job done and it answers the questions.
Then you are on your way to getting, you're on your way to getting major project of the year, right?
Okay.
See, one of the things, guys, right? There are some people who like to do smart and fancy, right? And there are some people who go for plain. But you know what? When I was doing my master's research, we all know APA format, right? And I learned it as an undergrad like you several years ago. And I just followed the rules, but I really didn't understand why we were using APA. When I was doing my master's now, we had to go in depth into APA, right? And that was when I understood the real reason APA came about. You see, what used to happen, APA stands for American Psychological Association. And what used to happen, you see, the person who just asked that question, and that's a fantastic question, by the way. What they found out, the American Psychological Association, what they found is that there were some students, right, years ago, decades ago before they invented the APA format, they found out that there were some students who had terrible research projects that didn't do the work, or the work wasn't done consistently and clearly. But when you look on the way they present the project, and they had color in there and a fancy, and the pages, it's like they print it out on gold paper and so on. And in the thing that, and I mean, they pay a professional bookbinder, to our publisher to put the thing together. So if you weren't paying close attention, you just look on the outside or on the aesthetics of the thing and say, my gosh, this must be a student. Now, another student, right, didn't have the glamour and the flashy, right, but they did what they were supposed to do. They did the work. They were very clear. They were very thorough. Their findings were done in a systematic way, and their conclusions were very obvious. That student now, when you look on it, you might say, oh, that student probably is a C student, man, or so. My gosh, they couldn't do a little better. But that student is actually an A student. So what the APA, how the APA format came about was to weed out the glitter and the glamour, right? To a certain extent, to allow everybody to present in a consistent way. So yes, you're allowed to do a little fanciness, but not too much, right? So that the key thing is on the quality, right, of the work that you did, all right? So you can add on the finesse on it and so on. Yes, you can have the lights blinking in your prototype, right? Yes, you can have the AI and all of that. But the key thing is, you see, it must do what you say you're supposed to do, what you set out to do. It must answer the research questions. So it don't make sense. You have all the lights flashing and all the fancy things, right? And you talk how much 1,000 lines of code you write. But at the end of the day, does it answer research question 1? No, we didn't get a chance to get around to that. Okay, does it answer research question 2? Well, not really, because we had a problem with this part of the code, and we decided not to address that one. Okay, what about your final question? It must answer research question 3. No, it never really answered research question 3. Actually, the answer for research question 3 came about because we did a survey, right? Then what's the purpose of the prototype? You understand?
So Mr. White, suppose your supervisor indicates that they have concerns about the value and creativity of your prototype. If you were the student, what would you be doing?
Very good questions. And I've seen that as well. I think it was last year or the year before. We had 2 cases like that. And we advised the person and they went back to the drawing board. There was a case where the student did something and it completely did not represent what they said they were, the original research topic. So they scrapped the prototype altogether and they got a good grade. They didn't get an A because they had to scramble, right? To finish it now based on the new thing. They got permission to tweak the topic and the research questions to now eliminate the prototype, right? But if they had continued with the prototype, they would have failed. Because and I think you know about that particular group I'm talking about, Susan, yeah, right?
Probably, but without even the reference of the title, I don't remember which one do you mean.
Yeah. So that is it though. The answer
Sorry
is,
guys, on the worst case scenario, I've seen even good students go to major project and literally break down crying. And it's really has been because of prototype projects. I remember some years ago. That wasn't recently, not in the pandemic, pre-pandemic. And it's really when students don't listen to the guidance of the supervisor.
Right.
It tends to be the case. Like they think they know everything. Like even bright students, they go, oh, you know, and part of it too is this whole idea of functional requirements. You learn in software engineering that you must ask the potential users. And some students think they know better than everybody, both the supervisor and the potential users, and doing what they want.
That is true. Can I tell you 2 things, quick things related to that? Let me talk about the things and the functional requirements and so on. I actually I was a member of the panel for the Sagicor Innovation Awards. As you know, our students got 1st, 2nd, and 3rd prize, right? We actually won the $1 million prize. But it's really like you're doing a short version of a major project, you know, right? And it was corporate Jamaica that was asking the questions. They had 2 judges from UTech, but the rest of persons were from Sagicor's senior executive. And you had just a few minutes or seconds to answer some of those questions. And in that 7 minutes, you have to make your pitch and you have to show that your prototype works, right? And that is what happened out there now. You remember I said in my opening that this is preparation for you in the working world, right? And you have to make the pitch and to make it good, right? So, you know, you want to answer the questions and show its relevance and all of that. But the second point I want to make though, is that some good students break down and I don't call them good anymore. Because I know some students are really strong and I know them personally, I see them, right? And then the group dynamics come and play, right? You see, what happened? You ever hear they say practice, practice, practice? How is it? If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. That's a cliche, right? That's well known. What you need to do, and I'm encouraging everybody, I know all of you are fantastic skid students, you wouldn't have reached final year, right? If you didn't have something to you. You have mastered all the obstacles along the way. You have passed everything and you are getting ready now to graduate, right? You're getting ready to lift off. Having come this far, right? You need to put all that you have learned. Some of you do IT project management, put it into play and have backup plan and have a backup for the backup plan. Have a plan A and a plan B. Remember I told Garisha Palmer earlier about students being allowed to record the prototype presentation. So what I told my students, for instance, my projects that I supervise personally, I tell them, look here, you're not going up there to embarrass us. You're going to demonstrate your prototype. And they did that. But you know what I told them to do? You also record the presentation beforehand so that if on the day, right, my students did something last year with a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino. If on the day, can you imagine the Raspberry Pi burn up? Oh, I can tell you something that literally happened. I had a project a few years, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, that we had a gas leak on UTech, right? It didn't explode, but they had to evacuate parts of the campus. And soon after, no sooner had that happened here on UTEX campus, there was a similar occurrence at, I think it was Campion College down the road, and it actually exploded, right? So those students came up with the major project to come up with a software and hardware prototype that would detect gas leaks in a jiffy of a time and sound an alarm on the campus. Pretty good project, right? Awesome project from several years ago. Now, they were using an Arduino Uno and a Raspberry Pi. And can I tell you something? On the day of the presentation, the Arduino that they had, right, refused to work. It just stopped working. It wouldn't even boot, right? But luckily, we had a plan. We had a plan B and a plan C, right? So they had recorded piece of the presentation, and some persons were not convinced. They wanted to see it work. So the students showed the video, right? In fact, I still have the video on my laptop because they sent it to me as well as backup. So you should also involve your supervisor in this. But the other thing is, we had a backup Arduino, and we had a hard panel, right? Because those persons were saying, no, man, we want to see it, even though when they showed the video, you know. And while they were showing the video, somebody else in the group now was loading it onto a new Arduino, which I provided them with. And at the end of the presentation, the team, they said, oh, but we just loaded it up on another Arduino. They can give us 2 minutes more. And the panel said, yes, you have the 2 minutes, and they showed it, right? So I don't think, I'm not gonna call you out, I'm not gonna agree with Susan and call you a good student, right? If you come with something to say, oh, we really had this working.
Perhaps they were good in other situations. Remember, you're not always good all the time, you know, Mr. White.
Yes,
so
yes.
People believe that there's something called A students and B students. I don't believe in that. I don't forget a student that came to me some years ago, a business student, tell me that they're an A student. I say, you could have got an A in every course, but in this course, you're not currently performing like A. And I invited that student to come to another class since I didn't know what was. Because they're like, nobody in my class get an A. I said, kindly come to my other tutorials because they're so brilliant presentations.
Yes,
You'll be astounded. Of course, I didn't come in because they were telling me how they and even got A in the test. A in the test meaning go get A in the presentation because it was a different subject. It was not the same. They were testing on concepts and they were presenting on something different. And they tell me, oh, she's an A student.
Yeah,
so yes,
let me tell you what I want. Yeah, let me tell you what I want.
The student may be good in some context and then they get cocky.
Yes.
Guys, we're not trying to scare you now. All we're trying to say is learn from every experience and
man,
always remain humble. Yes, including me and Mr. White. We can make mistakes. They must always be learning.
Please do.
Always be learning.
Let me tell you what you need to do, guys. Right? Just take it from me. Have a backup. Don't leave the coder, right? Are the best software developer in your group with the project on their laptop. Oh, that person have a MacBook, man. You know, they have the latest MacBook, right? And they have the code on there. So we leave it with them. And on the day of the presentation, now virus or JPS or the hard drive refused to boot, right? And what happened to the project? The project flopped. And it's not just the prototype, you know, though I was asked to speak on the prototype, but it also goes for the presentation itself. Have several copies of the presentation and have several dates on it as well. I'm in major project presentation and students stand up there and presenting out them heart and soul. And this was before the pandemic. And I literally saw a student kick the other student, right? There was a slide kick, you know, and the person said, what? You know, and the person whispered and said, you know, this is the wrong version of the presentation up there. Right? And they're gone halfway through the presentation. So what I'd suggested we see is do things like put a date on the presentation. So you know that this is the final copy. And then make sure that you alone don't have the final copy. Use up the technology, store it on Google Drive, right? Store it on your phone, right? So that you're ready. If it's Prezi you have, make more than one person have access to it. You understand, guys? And if it's possible, I know like some of the prototypes are expensive, like my two groups I'm supervising, right? One doing a robotics thing and the other one doing a smart cane and some pretty expensive sensors on it that we can't just get. If it stop work, it's not like you can go down to PriceSmart and say, oh, one more sensor. So what you want to do is to store it in a safe place Make sure water don't touch it and all of that. Make sure you know who have it, right? And if you can, if it's possible for you to have a backup of it, right? So you're doing your presentation, you're doing your prototype with a Raspberry Pi, or you're using a Microsoft Surface Pro or a MacBook or so. Make sure somebody else. There was a project 2 years ago with a simulation of driving on Jamaican roads, and they use a software called Carla, and that software could only run on an Apple. Right. Yeah, that software could only run on an Apple. And yes, Shanice, you can have a backup Arduino. We can talk about that.
Question, Mr. White?
Yes.
There's a question that says, should we show the code behind the prototype?
All right. It depends on what you're doing. If it is that you're doing something with a particular coding methodology, or so, but a lot of times the coding is not required, because that's where your supervisor comes in, right? So your supervisor is there to show us and to tell us that, yes, you have, this is not something you copy off the internet or you are plagiarize somebody else's work, but you have done the work. So when you present to your supervisor now, right, remember one of the requirements is for you to put that, the artifact, and that artifact might mean the code itself is going to be, before the pandemic, they used to say provide it on a CD and tape it to the project, to the thesis itself. So you're going to provide the code to your supervisor, but the code might not necessarily be a part of your prototype presentation. Remember, you only have between 5 and 10 minutes, probably 7 minutes, right? Tops. However, don't be surprised though, right? If a particular member of the panel asks to see your code, because there are some students who might try to come and try to pull wool over the people's eyes and say, oh yeah, we wrote this, right? And if the panel not convinced, they might say, okay, can we see the code, right? Because somebody might be trying to pull a fast one and do something with Photoshop or so on, right? And they want to see that you really did the code. Somebody might say, all right, that shows that you can take a 30 seconds and, you know, thing. Right? But usually it's not required. Unless, of course, what you're doing is something about programming. All right. Any other questions, guys? I'm late for my other meeting.
Yes, sir. In terms of the 25%, is it a case where the program just needs to work and it's automatic 25, or are there specific things?
There's never, thanks for that question, Markal. There's never any automatic grade, right? There's no automatic grade, right? So it's not a matter of the program just need to work. You have to take all the other considerations into mind. Does it do what it said it's supposed to do? But does it do it efficiently? Does it answer the research question? Does it provide the data, right? So somebody might build a website, right? And the website work. And they put 2 fancy buttons in there and you click, click, click. Yeah, and you say, yay. But at the end of the day, how does that website tie back into answering the research questions? You follow? So it's not a matter that it running, right? Anybody and their cousin who has passed programming 1 can write a program that work, right? But does it do what it said it's supposed to do? And does it do it efficiently, right? Does it answer? Does it match what you said you were going to do from chapter 1? Does it do it in a way that is workable? Is it feasible? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir, I get it.
All right. And our skit students have a reputation though of really doing excellent projects. In fact, some of those projects have been featured on TV, right? Just recently, a couple more of them were interviewed. What was it, 2 weeks ago, right? And don't be surprised if I see some of you. I want to see some of you on CNN, right? Yeah. All right, any other questions, guys? I'm way past my time. But I think I just have a good feeling that we're going to get some awesome projects this year. And I want to wish all of you the best. Okay, there's a question in the chat. Cassandra Barkley is asking, what happens to the prototype after the presentation? Well, remember, you know, what you submit to UTech is the property of UTech, right? So your thesis is the property of UTech. if you submit the prototype as part of your thesis, then that's also the property of UTech. If it is though that you have intellectual property, then intellectual property considerations might come into mind. For instance, what was the role of your supervisor in there? What's the role of your other group members? So all those issues you might want to discuss with your group, right? For instance, when you graduate, right? Suppose a particular member of the group wants to take the project and start a company out of it. What about the intellectual property, the contribution from the others, right? So what you can do, you can submit to UTech what is for UTech, and then you can then change up the project a bit, right? And work on it some more and even patent it, or you could come here and ask UTech to patent it for you, right? And you work with the university. In the Sagicor lab, you see, they have a sharing mechanism where Sagicor sponsors the groups that win. Sagicor offers to help them start a company, right? So they might pump a few $1 million into the student's account, and they say, okay, go and register as a company, and we will help you to copyright what you have done, right? Get a patent for it, and they work out. Sagicor gets a share, and the students get a share, right? So if they make something that becomes the next Facebook or the next Google or the next Tesla self-driving car, right? Sagicor might say, well, we get X%, and the students get a certain percent. Same thing with UTech, right? UTech has a IP unit, so they might want to, guys, I'm getting calls that I need to start the meeting now. Need to go to my other meeting. But I enjoy answering the questions. If you can take a few more, and then we go. So for instance, right. Yes, we're going to have meetings. I'm just wrapping up a presentation to the major project group for Susan there. All right, should be there in a little while. Yeah. All right, sorry about that, guys. So the presentation, you might want UTech to even help you with the patent and so on, and you work out a profit sharing agreement. Like UTech owns X amount, your supervisor owns X amount, you own X amount, right? But the short answer, whatever you present to UTech is UTech's property. But that doesn't stop you from taking your projects to afterward and changing it up in some way and developing it further. All right. Okay, any other question? All right, that's it. Susan. Yeah. Are there any other questions, team? If not,
Mr. Wise, I think I'd like to thank you for your very good presentation. Guys, if you have any other questions, I'm just going to say that you can email me at skidcapstone@gmail.com. I think everything else I was going to post on the chat. The next draft of the schedule is not going to be till tomorrow because I'm still getting so many emails about this to be added, this to be removed. It's going to be tomorrow for the next draft. And there's actually might be another draft on Monday morning because there's too many updates, and I want the final draft to be what really happens. Because last year this time there were, because of COVID and all kind of problems, but there were so many challenges. I want the final draft to be what really happens on the day, so that there's as little confusion on the day as is possible. So sorry for this lateness, but you know that on Tuesday, May 31st, if you already have ethics approval and a supervisor and you are on track, you expect to come to present. Okay? Anybody with a burning question that you want to ask? Anybody? So if not, let me first stop the live. Where's the live? How do I stop live on this thing? I don't even know.
All right. I'm going to leave.
Oh, somebody has a question?
No, I have a question, Prof. So for the report, the slide, we submitted on Monday. Is there a time frame for it or just before Tuesday?
I would say at this point by midnight.
All
If
right.
I know that for sure, if you have Dr. Damit Morani, he's going to want it as early as possible because he's very stern with deadlines. But I actually put Monday on it, but the earlier the better, because if you really want the panelists who actually look at those things, they don't just think that if you have 4 or 5 groups, you're not going to have enough time to look at them properly. So the earlier in the day, as you can send it in, the better.
Okay, Prof.
All right, everybody. I hope you have a very good weekend, productive, and as pleasant as it can be, given that we're all under lots of stressors. Happy weekend. Wishing you all the best in all of your academic and other future endeavors. Take care, guys.